Here we go. Perfect. So again, thanks for being here today. We're here to talk about the state of sales in 2020 and do some benchmarking with our own organizations with some research that we have done over the past few months with Accenture. So it's been really great to partner on this research, and some of the findings are pretty interesting, and we just look forward to kind of discussing them all together today. So my name is Cameron Hobbs, and I run the marketing and operations here at AA-ISP. So I'm going to mostly, stay on mute and stay in the background and help run some of the polls and things like that. But if you have any questions, use the chat throughout our session today. But I'd like to now pass it over to Danielle and Bob, who are going to take us through the research and play our host today. So Bob, if you want to take it from here.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Cameron. Big thanks to Accenture. We were fortunate to partner with them over the past year, and they have been such a great supporter. They are, definitely have the pulse on the digital sales, inside sales transformation, and you're going to see some of that today. I'd like to welcome Danielle Moffat, Managing Director. Danielle, great to work with you today.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really excited to be here, Bob.
Well, this is going to be more of a roundtable, so we want it highly interactive. Maybe we'll even give out a prize for the person who engages with us the most. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see chat, you'll see Q&A. You can turn on your camera. We really do like to see everyone. You can come on and off mute to ask a question. So we encourage lots of comments via chat, questions via chat, live conversation. Please don't be shy today, because it's a lot more about us telling you some of the research findings as it is us asking you and seeking your opinion. There's no right or wrong answer, so we can learn from each other. So with that, let's sort of jump in. As I mentioned, the evolution of inside sales, the changing nature of inside sales, we'll look at that. We'll look at how this whole work from home has been panning out. What are the challenges? What are some of the things we found through the research? A big one is performance. And, talking to a lot of you all, a lot of leaders, good is never good enough. You want to be above all of your goals. We're going to look at that. Maybe you can help us with some feedback on some of the things we can do to even improve that. And then finally, technologies playing a huge part, especially now that we're all working from home. So lots of interaction. We're going to have Cameron, I don't know how many, 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 polls during the session. And then of course we'll get into the good stuff. We're going to share what we found out through the research, but more importantly, let's be engaged with each other, sharing ideas, asking questions. So with that, Danielle, I'm going to ask you, if you could, to sort of set the stage of what you have seen in the recent few months, but also last couple of years with respect to some of the companies that you work with that have growing inside sales.
Sure. So since you're joining us today, I'm sure all of you will agree that there's never been a better time than now to be in the inside sales profession. And so our research will show, many of the insights that support this. And, as Bob and Cameron said, we're really excited to have this be interactive. And I have learned that Cameron is the poll queen in terms of just putting the polls in at the right places here. So first, let's look at inside sales as a whole. So inside sales is increasing in popularity and importance as a sales model. And when you look at the spectrum in terms of, complexity of the products and services being sold and the value of the products and services being sold, as we found in the research, the teams are handling big quotas. There are long cycle times. And with this, the scope of inside sales is really moving up the continuum and moving into this area that's, represented by the bubble, into spaces that have, in the past been held by field sales. So different models exist in terms of blended models. Some inside sales teams work independently, and then some work in collaboration with field sales. So with that, let's do our quick first poll to see how your teams operate.
Yeah, when you mentioned more responsibility and especially sales ownership, what we found over the last couple of years is what was a support function many years ago in a teamed model now is taking on more quota responsibility and what we call a discrete. Again, teamed, working with the field, sharing things, a discrete being sole owner of the account and the quota. So what best describes your inside sales function? If you would take that poll, and we got some answers coming in here. Danielle, are you seeing too a lot of companies are giving ownership, not just to small accounts, but ever increasing larger accounts to inside sales?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm surprised, particularly with some of the inside sales, or sorry, with some of the survey results that we've seen, how big some of the quotas are for the teams and how those are evolving. Some of the clients, for whom we provide services have also increased, the quotas and the targets over time. So it certainly is shifting and putting a lot more responsibility from a revenue perspective on the teams.
The first year the association measured this via a research project was in, I believe it was 2011. So that goes back about 9 years ago. And the team model was about 52%. Look at the results from the audience. Chat in right now. What do you think is driving the shift to full discrete ownership of accounts and quotas? Go ahead into the chat area. And Cameron, if you might help with the chat a little bit, if you see something that stands out, maybe we get the person to come on live and talk through it.
Absolutely. So I will point out that, here being, as Danielle said, the master of the polls over here, I see only about 65% of you all have voted. So this will be very interactive. So take just a quick second and, just hit the button. That'll really help, us to kind of make sure that we're driving the conversation, down the right path today. So
now, when we asked this question in the Accenture AA-ISP research, we got pretty much the same answer, a little less than 76. It was right around the 65, 68%. So let's congratulate the audience on being ahead of the time a little bit, right? Good job. We knew you all were professional. You're ahead of the curve here. That's great. Danielle, any further comments on this at all?
No, I think let's move on here.
Perfect. So with respect to new roles, Danielle, what are you seeing in terms of, we talked about this last week, some new roles that have been created really because of the demand for virtual selling?
Yeah, well, really within the context of the entire, what I would call the front office, which covers marketing, sales, and service, it's just a fascinating area. And then inside sales as a component within this has really evolved over the past 5 years, and in particular, the past 2 to 3. And one thing that I've really noticed as I speak with, our existing clients and other clients is that the way that they describe their teams are changing. And so, years ago, for sure, you would always hear inside sales, but more often it's, other names like digital sales, also a lot coming into the customer success and account management functions as well. So that's been really, really interesting to me to see how that has evolved as well.
Yeah, some new roles that have been imagined, right? I've seen some roles that are actually people that are actually digging into the data. There's so much data these days, and they're helping sales reps understand the data. That role didn't really exist a few years ago. So what's in a name, right? We've heard telesales years ago. That was very popular. My first start in 1993 was with Unisys telesales. I don't think they're called telesales anymore. Inside sales is very prominent. Let's fire up a poll. What do you call your internal, your inside sales organization? Here we go. So do you call it inside sales? Do you call it digital sales? We're seeing that. Do you call it virtual sales, telesales? If it's not inside sales, digital sales, telesales, go ahead and hit other. And then if you hit other and it looks like just one person, everybody pay attention. You got a poll. How are we doing on percentage respondents there, Cameron?
About 65% again. So looking like everyone who wants to participate is participating.
Okay. Well, I wish, we got to invent here. I think we need a new app that shocks somebody that's in a, you know, on a Zoom meeting here if they multitask. I know I do it all the time, right, Cameron?
Yeah, we may have a few who are dialed in as well and don't have access. So we're just, we're just going to give you as much crap as we can for the fun of it here.
And please, I'm having a little trouble with two screens seeing the chat, but please chat in. What do you call? There's two people that call their inside sales organization something else. Please chat that in. And Cameron, if you could kind of monitor that, if you would.
Will do, yeah. And I've got the results ready to share when you're.
We actually still have an old school telesales person. You know, I'm kind of fond of that name. I know we don't use it much anymore, but that's what I grew up on many, many years ago, as you can tell. Danielle, any thoughts on this, the results here?
I don't see the result. Oh, they just came through for me. Oh, okay. Very, very much so in terms of inside sales. Okay. Yeah, no, not surprising. It's slightly different than our results, but not surprising at all. Some digital sales, some telesales, and other. We have an account manager, Shelley, put in the window. That looks great.
And you can see what our study with Accenture showed. About 64% still on inside sales. Digital sales has been growing in its use. And yeah.
And I think I'll just focus in on the 24% of other, because that's, you know, that's significant, right? That's about a quarter of the survey responses in this other bucket. And just really emphasizing how there's this, you know, when you look across particularly marketing, sales, and service, and looking at the inside sales space, it's moving, you know, in both directions and kind of all around. So I think while it's super interesting, it's also not too surprising.
Yes. I know Cisco as an organization moved to a nomenclature of virtual. Of course, they have a product that helps support virtual interaction with customers, but they use that. Interestingly, Microsoft, when about 3 years ago, when they were just blowing up their inside sales from literally nothing to close to 1,500 sellers, they originally actually thought of telesales, and then they moved into inside sales as a name. So very good. Let's go ahead and Danielle, if you would comment on a little bit on this huge, you know, thing that happened in March, where everybody was sent home to work from home and to work remotely. And what are you hearing out there on that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, certainly interesting, and it affected, you know, it affected everyone, right? Just in terms of the range of support and questions and needs that arose out of that. You know, we went from conversations with clients like, help, I don't have any inside sales capabilities at all. Like I need some now. To, you know, I have them, but we don't know how to do it remote, to, you know, I really have to ramp this up. So there's a full range of sort of client needs that came in. And I think it's been really interesting as everyone has, I think it's, you know, it happened to everybody at the same time, right? And so I think it's interesting to see how successful the model has been in many ways, and that some companies are, you know, choosing to either remain virtual or have a mix of virtual and office. But I think it's a, you know, a permanent change in the ways of working.
It is.
Oh, I see something.
Yeah. Did we have a chat coming in?
We have something in the chat room there.
Okay.
Let's see. It's from Ryan. Oh yeah, just from the other page.
Yeah. Hey, Bob and Danielle, just from the previous page, I'm, you know, definitely interesting with the new roles kind of coming in, and the focus on account management and also customer success. But you know, I think, and it's not particular to the Silicon Valley clients, but I think a lot of the Silicon Valley clients are leading that kind of change, where they're creating the revenue function and elevating that above, you know, marketing, sales, and the customer organization. So, you know, really focusing around everything that we can do across the spectrum to bring that revenue in, and then obviously the cross-sell, upsell that travels with that from a customer success perspective.
Speaking of Silicon Valley, Salesforce.com it's about 13 years ago, introduced this new role. It wasn't called customer success. I forget what they called it, but it was put in place after someone bought Salesforce.com to make sure they're using it, to make sure they're getting value out of it, so that when the renewal time came, they would renew and maybe grow. So we're seeing a lot of that. Back over here, as Danielle was talking, one of the things I thought is field sales. You think today there's about 8 million field compared to about 7 million inside. We're almost 50-50. But we feel that, yes, field sales over the last few years has adopted video. They've been texting. They've been using social. They've been using some of the things that really are the foundation for inside sales. I feel that now them being largely forced home and forced to sell virtually, I say their toolkit will have been expanded because of the unintended consequence of the pandemic. And I think, as Danielle showed on that first slide, inside and field kind of coming together. What are your thoughts on that? There's a great question. Let's get some chat activity out there. What are your thoughts on the future of inside sales and field sales? Will we come together and just be sales? Will field still exist? Will inside still exist? I said in an interview last week that absence makes the heart grow fonder. And by that, I mean, when face-to-face, if face-to-face comes fully back, I think there'll be a premium on visiting someone. Now, let's get into the research. So we asked the question, after this whole pandemic COVID-19 thing stops and we get back to somewhat normalcy, are you going to return to your office setup as it was? Will there be a hybrid, a mix of work from home, virtual office, or are you going to stay home? And there's the questionnaire right now. So let's take the survey. Let's get 100% participation. Cameron, how do we do that? You have anybody have, here's a question. Do you have a tip for 100% audience participation in Zoom meetings? All right. What are we looking at here? Oh, look at this. Look at the number of people that said they're going to remain working from home.
But nobody else can see it besides you until we are done polling. So you're getting a sneak peek there, Bob.
Oh man, you're not going to. Well, let's first do this. Don't show it yet. Don't show it. I'm going to show you what the Accenture AISP study found, if I can figure that out. We found that half are going to have a mix of virtual work from home and the office. Almost 30% are going to stay at home, and just 19% are going back to the office full time. I think we're going to have a lot of buildings for rent. What do you think, Danielle? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm in the mix of virtual and office, but really am seeing, multiple models depending on the clients in the industries. I'm just reading some of the comments in the chat window too. They're, just going back to the first slide in terms of the role of inside sales and the evolving role of inside sales.
Well, let's see the results, Cameron. This is incredible. Very similar. And the results are being shared right here. So only 22% going back to the way it was. A big mix of hybrid, virtual, and office. But the one that's standing out to me is work from home. Please chat in right now what you think is driving staying at home. Is it higher productivity? Is it less costly for the companies? Please chat that in. Who would like to be the first person to unmute and talk to this? Who would like to? I could call on someone. I used to be a teacher. Can you tell? Who could we call? Danielle, do you want to call on someone to maybe comment on this?
I don't know. I'd love if somebody volunteered.
Yeah, let's try that, huh?
Yeah.
Raise your hand.
I know. I mean, I'll say something. So I know a lot of our chapters have been having these conversations in their chapter meetings. And, I think when we had this conversation in May, it was, the numbers were much higher that, we'll return back. And then the numbers, it all just it just keeps kind of changing and going down. And I mean, one of the
Mm.
trending articles today on LinkedIn is around, I think it was like, oh, January 2021, back to your office, haha, no more. That is the trending #1 article right now, because that was the plan. Everybody made these plans that January would hit and things would get back to normal, and that's not necessarily the case. So I know for our community, a lot of our members look to some of the larger companies like the Googles, like the Apples, like Salesforce, and following kind of what they're doing and taking that as their their pulse on what they will do. And so we're seeing that with our chapters as well, having those conversations as we look at, as an association, even when will our community be able to get back together? When will our chapters be able to get back together? So yeah, I think
Shall-
interesting. And then there's quite a few questions, Bob, just around what other in the survey meant. And I'll go back and kind of pull and see maybe what some of those comments, because if they selected other, they would have put in kind of what their plans were. And it could just be, I have no idea. So I'm going to put other. So I'll look at that and I'll chat in here if I can figure that out.
Yeah, perfect. Shelley started to raise your hand. I think you were going to comment on the work from home. Shelley, yeah.
I did. What we found, we had a mixed group prior to COVID. And what we found for the folks that were in the office working is that the productivity has gone up significantly.
Wow. Yeah.
And they attribute it to not just the ability to spend more time, what they would typically be driving to and from work, but the flexibility that they have as well. And they feel like there's more work-life balance. So it's really a lot easier to sell it internally to keep those folks. We were about 75% in the office, 25% that were working remote. So, it's been a lot easier to sell that, at least in the short term. We do plan to revisit it later this year, towards the end of the year, but I expect to see that continue.
That's great. Thanks, Shelley.
I think one thing that's been really interesting too is just with that flexibility for workers and sellers, right? Like inside sellers, that's happening across the country right now. And we have a number of clients where we're doing inside sales for them, and we invested in some best time to call analytics, right? Because the way to reach people and the times to reach people and all of those things totally shifted. So as people kind of were working from home, and maybe they're working earlier or they're flexing around, at play dates and various things, pod sessions or whatever people had for their families or their personal lives. It's just really interesting to see that shift, and to see our teams kind of adjust on the fly to reaching people and still connecting, but in a different way. And then the flexibility for them personally to work from home certainly enabled them to kind of better do that, to better reach those prospects.
Any others would like to comment?
Thanks, Brian. I see a comment from Miguel. So it looks like he's saying there's a possibility these numbers will change as people spend more time working from home and organizations implement the right tools and technologies to be more productive and communicate better. I believe people will adapt better. Yes, we have a whole section, Miguel, on technology. So we'll get to that in a moment, because I think that's super interesting in this context as well.
So it's a really perfect segue to our next series of topics here on performance. In fact, I was speaking with a VP of a large inside sales team that told me after about 2 weeks after the initial shock, oh no, what are we going through? She saw an uptick in the performance across a variety of metrics. So let's see what we found out about performance here.
So Bob, real quick, before you go on to this, so we did put together 3 questions, just kind of still on the idea of where we're working, how we're hiring, if we're hiring. We're just really looking to poll you all. So I'm going to put up a poll, and it's going to be 3 questions at once. If you can just go ahead and answer that, and then we'll take a look at those as well.
Great, thank you. Let's see here. Are you currently hiring? Yes or no? And then we ask, how is your onboarding? If you have a new hire and you got to train them on a scale of 1 to 10, how effective do you think your remote virtual onboarding is now. And the third one is on a scale of 1 to 10, how effective do you think your remote coaching is? Coaching was hard enough when we were all together, I believe. Maybe it's harder today. We'll find out. All right, we have a lot of things coming in here, and we'll give it just a minute. And Cameron, once you think we're at our at our number, we can share this.
And while those are coming in, so I mentioned, what the other around this would be, and the comments are actually a little still in planning. So that was, a lot of it, people weren't sure on what their plans would be, post COVID. And then the other kind of trend was around, my role has been eliminated, sadly, and I'm looking for a new role. So there was a little bit of that as well. This was sent out, right when there was a lot of that happening within the community. So you see how that could have happened there. So I think we're good here. I'm going to go ahead and end, and then I'm going to share the results.
So let's look at this. So hiring, more hiring than not. Danielle, do you see the same thing when you speak to some of your customers?
Yeah, no, I'm really happy to see that, because that, that as I mentioned earlier, right, COVID has really accelerated the shift for those who haven't yet been there from a model perspective, and those that are already there are certainly increasing in specific industries and specific products and services being sold, particularly cloud-based solutions. So I think that one resonates. Probably a good industry correlation with some of that. And then it's it's revealing, but a little bit sad to see some of the low scores for the onboarding, right? I guess there's, you have some pretty good scores at the end, lots of 9s,
13,
maybe a 10
19,
or so,
38.
but it's really all over the board, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you bucketed 5 and below as room for improvement, we'll call it that in a nice way, room for improvement. It's almost 50% that really needs to get after it in a different or better way. I'm very happy though to see 30% or got it down, it looks like, or maybe more than that.
That's awesome.
The coaching now, this is interesting.
This is really interesting. It's surprising to me, but really interesting to see that we have, Bob, as you and I were discussing earlier when we were creating some of the polls, this one we were expecting to be a little bit lower.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I kind of, like I mentioned earlier, I think the audience, this is interesting. What we find is the people that take time to learn, that take time to invest in, say, a roundtable like this or a webinar, tend to be people that are pretty good in their trade, right? And sometimes are a little bit more advanced in some of these areas. So I attribute that to the audience here. So everybody can give themselves a bit of a pat on the back here, I think. All right.
Bob, I have an interesting comment. I was involved in a conversation yesterday, and they were talking about new hires and how hard it was to get different, talent in and that kind of thing. And they said that their turnover was pretty high as well. And some people weren't lasting the week, so they weren't really getting into the training until after that week. And I said, well, maybe that's the problem. Like maybe they're bored out of their minds, and that's an onboarding issue. And they were like, oh, okay. So I mean, just something to think about around that.
Yes, very good. And this is an area we're still learning. And as someone mentioned earlier, we're going to learn new ways of doing things through hardship. Okay, let's go ahead. I think we're ready to get into performance here. So let's look at that. This was a big one. I'm not going to tell you what the results were from the Accenture AA-ISP research yet. But I think we have a poll here, which has to do with last year and this year. So here you go. In the full year, fiscal year 19, did you hit 100% or above? If you hit 99%, that's not too bad. That's better than average. But if you hit 99% or below, that's a no. And we want complete honesty here. Oh, I know this group is advanced, Danielle. So we're going to expect maybe a little better than our research showed, maybe. And then this is a little tougher because we do have 2.5 months. We're deep or right into Q4 if your fiscal is calendar year. So you have to forecast and project. But this is really, really interesting. And I think Cameron just shared the results. So
I went ahead and closed it. I don't know if you want to share first before you go.
yeah.
Okay.
Can you see it now?
Yep.
Can.
Yep. So almost 50-50 on yes or no from the audience, which seems about right. But 2020 is going to be a tough year. You can see that 64% aren't. And chat in, why do you think? Is it your quotas were too high? Is it customers were too hard to engage? Was it budgets were frozen? Chat that in. We really want to hear. Danielle, any of your thoughts here as well?
No, it was it was a nice contrast, right? And obviously there would be a COVID impact, but in terms of what aspect of the impact did COVID contribute? I think you had some really great questions there. And Bob was very hard line when we were looking at these results. You know, he was like, no, it was 99%. That's not 100.
We got it down to a T. And in 2019, look at this, almost identical to the group. But once again, our group's a little bit better than the average. I love that. Another pat on the back. Let's see here. On to the next piece here. We asked the 2020. Here's one. We're going to get into metrics here very quickly. And I think we do have another poll here, don't we, Cameron? Do we have another one coming up? Yeah. Has your metrics goal changed during this pandemic? And if you say yes, we're going to ask you to chat in or come on camera, come off mute and talk to how did they change? Were they lowered? Was quota lowered? Was activity metrics lowered? Maybe raised, who knows?
And well, just while we're waiting for the results to come in, I'll just share a brief story about one of our clients, for whom we provide services. Well, they're, what we're selling on their behalf is in-person training. And so you can imagine how, wildly unpopular that was.
Yeah.
Wildly unpopular during COVID. So anyways, there was a shift and, we moved to different types of training and moved things out. So there was certainly some adaptation there, but huge impact just based on the type of product being sold.
It looks like 4 of you, I'll share the results. It looks like 4 of you said they did change. Would any one of the 4 be willing to just come off mute and talk a little bit about what did change and why it changed? You can just raise your hand and we'll.
Hey, Bob.
Hey.
Nathan Ardice. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, we're actually a clinical communications software, and we sell to hospitals here in North America. And so the biggest shift for us, obviously, was, well, there were quite a few, right? But, hospitals were a little tied up with, accommodating their patients and their communities during the pandemic. So their budgets changed. I mean, hospitals, that you would not have thought would be hurting for cash immediately, went into hundreds of millions of dollars of losses within a quarter. And so the entire landscape and what their priorities were had shifted immediately. So we had to pivot as an organization and we made some pretty significant changes. And so that was our personal experience with that. We're starting to see it come back up, because, we don't know if the second wave is going to hit or what, but that's the good news is that we think we're on the tail end of it and budgets are starting to pick back up and they're planning into 2021.
Nathan, I heard some feedback, maybe you can comment on this or anyone else, that because people were largely stuck at home, working at home, they were not going out to lunch as much. They weren't down the hallway at the water cooler. They weren't over in someone's office. They weren't in a meeting room. And therefore they were close by their phone. And that actual connection rates, assuming assuming the person had the correct phone number, right? Assuming that connection rates actually went up because of that. What have you heard?
Depending upon the persona. So we have 4 key personas that we're actually reaching out to. So we have physicians, we have nursing, we have informatics, which is kind of IT, and then we had IT itself. IT connections, we seem to be able to get those guys on the phone a little easier because they were usually working from home.
Okay.
However, physicians and nursing staff and everybody else was pretty challenging.
Well, let's take a look at some of the specific metrics here.
There was, Bob, real quick,
Yeah.
I know you can't see the chat, so I wanted to
Yep.
share this. There was a comment around how the business unit had their forecasts lowered, but not individual sales reps. So interesting. And I've seen quite a bit of that on LinkedIn, or some of it was also, if people aren't able to reach as many, a few months ago, there was a lot of conversation around it. If you can't reach as many prospects, if you're not able to do this, there aren't budgets. Why are you, how are you expecting somebody to make the same, quota? So that was an interesting conversation. I'm sure we can probably even find some of those threads if you're interested, but it got heated, I'm sure.
I just see the chat now. I found out how to take a look here on 2 screens, but Shawanda, yeah, she typed in that the business unit lowered it, but not the reps. Well, we're going to stick it to the reps one more time, right? But no, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I've heard about the stats you typed in. A lot of people just left everything alone, and it is what it is. I believe when we asked you about 2019 versus 2020, I believe that it is harder to sell through the pandemic, generally speaking, most industries. And that's probably why more of you said you won't hit 100%. So that's understandable. We asked the question in our research, how many call attempts are you making? How many live conversations? Yes, the phone is not dead. The phone is alive and well. Yes, email and social works, texting works, video works, social works, but the phone works great too. So we asked the question, live conversations, which by the way, could be Zoom or could be the phone. And then we asked, how many demos are you doing on average per month? And no big surprises here. Danielle, do you have any thoughts on a bit of the correlation to activity and results?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just comment first on the daily call attempts, because this is something that many companies measure, and they have targets. And then we even had one client that I work with, when we were originally having some discussions with them on taking on their inside sales. They wanted a service level agreement around the dials, right? So we had to move them away from the dials to the impact. Right? Like, what are we really trying to impact here versus just making this number of dials? So I think that one's interesting. And then, just with the demos, I mean, that's why we put the red box around this, right? Like, it's not surprising. The more demos you get to per month, the greater your attainment to quota.
And I like that one. I also really like the live conversations. Boy, unless somebody's ordering off Amazon, like I do too much, and I know Cameron does way too much, but unless you're ordering on Amazon, it often takes a good couple of deep discovery conversations, needs analysis, relationship development, rapport building. That doesn't happen as well digitally through email, texting. It happens on good conversations, whether it's a phone or for a video call. So we see a nice correlation. I really wish every sales rep took heart with this and could see the correlation here. Any comments from you all on what you're seeing on this slide? Feel free to chat those in. Prime Day. When is Prime Day, Cameron? Every day?
You missed it. No, it is. But yes, yeah, the last 2 days.
All right. Any comments? Feel free to chat it in here, and we will save a little bit of time to come off the PowerPoint here in a minute and to just have a live roundtable discussion. So, Danielle, anything else before we move on?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. So let's go to this slide here.
Yeah, and so in terms of looking, through the survey, what are some of the key factors or the ingredients to convert the leads into the meetings? Really just in looking through, the full survey results, we condensed it down to 3 different factors. So 1 is the persistency factor, 2 is the timing, and then 3 is the technology. And I thought the persistency was really interesting. So you could see that about just over half is around 4 to 7 touches, but collectively, if you look at 4 and above, that's 84%, which is really significant. And then moving down to the time, you can also see, from 1 to 1 month or more is a full 71%. And I think that the combination of those 2 factors together made it really, really apparent, as I mentioned on the first slide, that the teams are handling complex products and solutions. It's multi-touch. It takes time, patience, relationships. So that was very, very much supporting results. And then from a technology perspective, I sort of, mulled on this one a little bit because it's a little under half using AI, a little over half using call recording or coaching. And so that's, that's great. I think the AI was a little bit higher than I was expecting it to be. So I was happy to see it as high as it was. But then on the other hand, if you look at it, it's like, what an opportunity that many of the survey respondents have to bring technologies into their operations. So there is that big opportunity. And then as we went back to one of our polls where we spoke about the coaching and the onboarding, I think there's a lot of use cases there, as well as some automation capabilities that can help with some of these touches and some of the work orchestration in those components.
Very good. We had a comment from Shelley here, and I agree with it. And she said a number of our customers had phone challenges, maybe because they were on a unified phones, voice over IP phone system at work, but now they didn't have that capability, so they went to cell. So they found that using emails was helping to increase the connection rate, right? So use an email and get through that way. Michael mentioned less than 1% of download leads convert to meetings. The methodology is flawed and inefficient. That is a really good point. It's a whole separate area. We haven't really talked about marketing MQLs, leads, lead intent, using intent data. I don't know, Danielle, if you have any comments on that one. I know it's out of scope here a little bit, but it's interesting.
No, it's actually really interesting. It's it's very I don't know that I've seen 1%, but it is you do get a lot of leads from just looking at downloads. We did one of our clients, we started with about, I believe it was 200,000. So they came to us for help, and this was a few years back, so it wasn't COVID. So they had this inundation of leads, and their leads were basically from downloads for usage of some of their products. And it was SMBs were their target audience, and so it was what they had in place was a very manual model, which was very inefficient and difficult to be able to follow up. And it was really interesting. We brought in an asset called Intelligent Revenue Growth. And basically what that does is it helps to enrich, automate, and bring in different sources of diverse data into those leads so that you could then prioritize those. And so if I recall, I'd have to check the numbers. I haven't looked for quite some time, but I feel like we went through this whole process, we went from about 200,000 leads down to, I believe it was like 20,000 that actually needed, human follow-up. And so think about the efficiency gain that, various technologies bring in that case. So what else? So Michael, any other comments on that? Thanks for sharing.
And Cameron, to Danielle's point there on lead prioritization and scoring and use of intent data, we had a recent webinar. I can't remember the title of it, but if you might know what that is, Cameron, maybe you could chat in the link to people, ways to improve, who to prioritize to call was a big part of this webinar. So if Cameron finds that, she'll chat that in. And then staying with this technology piece, boy, what, when's it all going to end? We've asked through different kinds of research, what's your tech stack? How big is it? Is it growing? And yes, it is growing mostly. And we asked a series of 3 questions here. So Danielle, you want to get us started on this one?
Sure. Yeah. So we have 3 questions. So we'll go question by question, ask the poll, and then show the results. So one of the areas that we're really interested in is the average number of technologies used by inside sales. And again, this goes back to the complexity, right? In terms of how many different systems, tools, and technologies are needed. So let's see what people on the call have.
How much? Yeah. Average number of technologies used by an inside sales rep or BDR at your company.
I think another way you could ask is, how many technologies have you purchased that they're not using as well?
Oh boy, that's probably a bigger number. So let's see. Keep choosing 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 10, 10 plus. How many do we have here at the AISP, Cameron?
At least 43.
Oh.
No, yeah, not that many.
Okay. All right. When you think we're ready to go. All right. So 4 to 6. Let me pull the here we go. 4 to 6 was the number 1 response. 1 to 3. That's interesting. I think that's not a lot. I'd like that actually, but 7 to 10. And let's see what the results were from our survey here. Very similar. The largest bucket was 4 to 6, as it was with the audience.
And about 10 for 7 to 10.
Yep. Yep.
And then just a bit of variation. Okay, great.
Yeah, good.
The next one is just around the usage of video. And so we wanted to understand, if people were routinely using two-way video. And so this one's easy. It's just yes or no.
Oh boy, I will give prizes to everyone if it stayed at 100%, but it didn't. For those of you that type in no, you're not using live two-way video, I would be super appreciative if you could chat in why you're not using video, please. I really would love to see the reason to that. And wow, this is interesting. So this is real. Let me pull that over. This is really interesting. So who would like to come off mic and help us understand the reason that you're not using live two-way video? Who would be willing to do that? Well, there's 6 of you. I'd have a 50-50 chance of picking the right person. Either chat it in or raise your hand real quick.
You've got one in the chat, Bob, around just reps turning off video.
Oh, the other person turning it off?
Reps. So many reps turn off video. Yeah.
Yeah.
They turn off video. We turn off their salary. Does that work? No, I just kidding.
Somebody quote that.
They turn it off. Why would they turn it off? The rep turned it off is what the comment is. Not enough time. My instant sales rep is covering 700 accounts each. Yeah, that makes sense. Not dressed up. Having a bad hair day. No, Michael, no makeup. It's great. Video fatigue. We all feel that.
Yeah.
There was another one, Bob, right at the above there. We record calls and the system doesn't have the capability to include video, which we've heard that. There are definitely some that do. That's something.
I know we have a system that does allow us to record video and a call, correct?
Yeah.
Michael's funny. I
And
like
we,
it.
Yeah, Michael.
Put on weight during COVID-19.
Oh man,
One
COVID.
thing
The COVID-15 now.
Yeah. Somebody said, unsure, Ryan had said, unsure if our customers will accept video calls. And I think one of the best practices we've heard, Bob, and I don't know who had said it, but, always say, I'm going to have my video on, in your meeting invite, this is a Zoom link. I'm going to have my video on. You're welcome to do the same. If not, that's okay as well. And I mean, in a daily, just in, in my role, even speaking with people outside of AA-ISP, I would say it's about 50-50 that will turn on their video, but my video is always on. And as whether, I'm not even in a selling role per se, but I use that in a way to kind of keep myself engaged in the conversation a little bit more. And I think that's important for reps too.
It does. That's interesting, Cameron, because I've really noticed that from you just, over the past year, pre-COVID, you were always, you always encourage the video. There was a comment there about the recording calls and the system doesn't have the capability to include video. So we partner with Gone, and in conversations with them, I've heard that they can publish the proper stat, but there's a significant correlation between video usage and sales closure. So I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't heard that before, but they have thousands upon thousands of hours of recordings upon which they can do that analysis.
I could spend, Cameron will tell you, I could spend an hour on this topic alone, but let me leave you with a couple of tips or best practices. When the human being sees another human being face to face, eye contact to eye contact, which I'm doing right now, I'm looking at the camera, a chemical called oxytocin is released in the brain, and it's a warm up, feel good, rapport building chemical. So wouldn't you want that? Number one. In fact, we had a body language expert, Leo Cardenas. In fact, Cameron, I'm going to ask you to go out to the Inside Sales Studio, get a Leo Cardenas body language link and chat that in. Leo says that if you're not using video, even looking up a person's LinkedIn profile and looking at their face helps in the engagement if it's going to be a phone to phone, believe it or not. The other thing is use of gestures. Sometimes words are only part of the message. Somebody using their hands, making good eye contact, smiling, all those things can help you communicate. More importantly, you can read them in the other person. It helps you read a person's, what they're thinking and, how they feel and so on and so forth. So needless to say, we're big believers in video. Danielle.
I think you covered it. No,
All
you're
right.
good.
Let's
Yeah.
go to question number 3 then. And that is, we'll get that poll up here. Are you using a call recording platform as part of your remote coaching tech stack?
And I'm particularly interested in some of the responses here in light of the responses in one of our previous polls, which was the remote coaching. So that would be interesting to hear a little bit more on.
All right. We'll just give it a second here.
It's amazing the advancements in the various call recording platforms, and then some of the transcriptions in terms of speech to text and the analysis that can be done upon the results to really understand how different agents perform, how different teams perform, what are some of the criteria. It's the amount of analysis in these technologies today are just incredible.
Yeah, and it looks like the audience here was
Similar, yeah.
Similar, very similar. Danielle, any comments on? We're a big believer in call recording technologies is really helping coaching, especially remotely.
I think it's critical, particularly going forward, and particularly with some of the advanced types of technologies versus if I think back to 5+ years back, a lot of the call recording technology was just used to, somebody would take that recording and then they'd listen to it, they do a manual audit, and then they sit with the rep and then they go through it together. And that's like the, the process of the old, whereas the newer technologies, can give you like rep, team, a group scorecards basically, which is really amazing.
The other thing, which when we were all in an office, we could learn by overhearing, by observing, and we don't have that capability because we're stuck on an island at home. And call recording coaching platforms can also be used to share a great call with the rest of the team. Hey, listen to how Mary used open-ended questions in the discovery portion of the call, and then they share that out. So it can be used as not only coaching, but training.
And I know that in one of our programs that we have, one of our client engagements, we have the ability to store, so if you have a really great recording, you have the ability to store it like in a library so that it can be used in training or in that context, right? Whether it's in person or remote.
Good. Well, let's see. Oh boy, 3 minutes left. Perfect. We're just gonna. I think we're done. Cameron, do we have anything we need to share? Here's our contact information. Please reach out to myself, Danielle, Cameron, with any questions, comments. If you have a particular topic you think the AISP should bring to a roundtable format like this, we will be releasing the formal survey results in several weeks. I'm not sure when that is targeted for, Cameron, but we'll get that posted to the website so you can have access to that. Any final questions? Cameron, would you please comment on the Women's Sales Summit?
Yeah. Yep. So we have a really awesome event coming up on November 5th. That's about 3 hours, 3.5 hours, but it's all focusing on women in sales and leadership and diversity and inclusion. So we're focusing on 2 topics throughout the event. We'll have keynotes and then panels supporting that, and then just like this, but roundtable discussions to dig into those topics. So open to everybody to join us. We'll also have an expo of some of our proud supporters, and this event is supporting and funds are going towards the Barbara Giamanco Scholarship Fund, and this was put together by our Chicago and Columbus chapter. So we're really excited about it. Totally, share it with your teams, but open to everyone to join, no matter their role or their gender. We're got muted there, but really looking forward to bringing everyone together for this great cause.
And you'll chat in the registration.
Already done.
All right, already done.
She is with it.
Well, I'd like to thank the attendees. Cameron, this will be available for replay.
Yep, it'll probably go up in the Knowledge Center tomorrow morning. So I will send an email out to everyone who registered as well with a link to go grab that. And if you're not an AA-ISP member, it'll be live for 2 weeks. You'll have access. If you need to know anything about membership and getting more involved, definitely reach out as well.
And then thanks to Cameron. Danielle, thank you very much. It was wonderful working with you leading up to some of this interesting findings here. And we look forward to working together with Accenture more in the future.
Great. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
All right, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you.